Great, thank you. Next question, please. No more questions? Yes, gentleman just over there. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jason Maud from Isabel Healthcare. The question really for Jim is that you gave an impassioned plea to everybody today to change, and he said the problem was us. And I remember when Sir John King talked about changing British Airways, he said it's easier to change the people than change their attitudes. What are you going to do? We've only got a short amount of time. How are you actually going to get people on the ground to change their attitudes? I mean, I've been trying to sell what I call the blindingly obvious to the NHS for 10 years. So
you need to change yourself then.
Change yourself. How are you going to change those people that we go and see day in, day out and get them to say, yes, we're interested in looking at something new, rather than no, we've got no money, we can't look at anything new?
Well, again, what we're trying to do is have a range of responses that add up to deep cultural change, but it's not instant. So it ranges from working with 1,000 people who we think are the most influential leaders for the first time we've ever done it across the NHS, to get them trained and supported in thinking about their role in driving this change. We've never done that before. It includes the work we do with the newest young leaders coming into the service, the people coming through the NHS graduate training scheme, to get them focused and energised as agents of change and get these skills. It includes events like this to create a culture and an atmosphere. What I would say is that the evolutionary pressure for the last 10 years for what you're talking about has been low. You know, frankly, when I was a successful hospital chief executive, you had to be pretty dumb to foul up, you know, because the money rolled through the door year on year, whether I ran excellent services, and I did do some of that, or mediocre services, and I had a bit of that as well. The evolutionary pressure is ramping up very aggressively. And what I was trying to say in my piece was that anyone who believes that some kind of repetition of their current practice will be successful is going to be found out not over the 10-year horizon, but over the next 18 months. So we're trying to create a high pressure and high support environment. We're driving tariff very hard for providers so that they can't survive without changing their business. If you want to carry on running a hospital by turning episodes of care through the door, I'm going to try and kill that business model by killing the price. If you want to create a new business model that creates excellence and innovation, we'd like the tariff system to encourage it. So a high pressure environment, and underneath that, in terms of leadership development, support programs, these kind of awareness raising things, we're trying to provide support to match the pressure. It's not a single bullet solution, but culture never is.
Jim, the message we've had here loud and clear in the course of the last 2 days from you and other people at the top of the NHS is, you know, yes, very clear. You want to drive through major changes. But I think, just picking up the point that gentleman was making, how are you communicating that to the people at different levels within the NHS, apart from the normal drip feed of communication? You know, here's the morning video, you know, here's a message that drops in on your computer screen. Are you, for example, introducing classes in how to change your attitude when you've been set in your ways for 20 years, always done something a particular way?
It's an attractive title for a class. Yeah, we're doing three things, and it includes the standard things. I mean, one element of the QIP is something we call the Massive Engagement Programme, where we just do literally thousands and thousands of interactions, and we've been remarkably successful. We, not us, have been remarkably successful in getting the message of QIP out, not by no means perfectly, but much more richly than we normally do. It's no coincidence that if you pick up a national newspaper, it will talk in a way as though it's part of the sort of the law, LORE, that the NHS faces a challenge of £20 billion. That's because we've been, I mean, David Nicholson was the first public sector leader, and maybe still the only one, to name a number, which he did to create a vehicle for a message. So we're doing that. We're doing some mobilisation work, so that the communication stuff tends to drive through the hierarchy. You can't really build change that well through the hierarchy. So we're doing some work which Helen Bevan is leading for me, which a colleague many of you know, on using actually political campaigning techniques to identify and support in the first wave 10,000 kind of energised leaders of change who may or may not be in positions of direct authority, and kind of connect them, give them support, build them as teams, encourage them to find ways through, and we're encouraged and excited by that. And we are doing training. I wouldn't want any part of this discussion to undervalue the remarkable change effort that NHS leaders have delivered. The reason that people may not have been interested in your project is that they've been busy transforming the NHS from one of the most underperforming healthcare systems in Europe to a system that in the last 2 Commonwealth Fund studies came first and second out of the 9 system study. That's not to be complacent about where to go, but that's been an effort that healthcare leaders from across the world come and understand how did you do that. And we've been very narrowly focused on those things to the often deliberate exclusion of other potential and important benefits. And now we need to broaden the focus to include those, and changing people's mode of operation is important. But to start that conversation, I don't think you were doing this, but I do hear it sometimes, with a sort of a sweeping denigration of the capability of people, I think would be an error. All the evidence shows that when we've sought to bring in colleagues from other industries who've often done well, we don't find that we're any better or worse than those people. We've got actually an equivalent group of people with some cultural differences and some skill set differences.
I think it would be fair to say that the companies that our panelists are representing have all been through some pretty deep changes in the last. We heard about Clays, but I guess all of you at some point in the last 10 years or so have been through pretty deep change. Maybe a lot of it quite recently driven by the recession. Any tips that you would give to the NHS, Rick?
Well, I think, and Jim, I'll pick up on your last point there. No industry, to my knowledge, is immune to this. We all are struggling with cultural change, we're struggling with productivity challenges, with innovation, we all have that desire. So there's a lot to learn, again, I think, from each of us. Some of the tips that we learned, if you will, looking back, some of our lessons learned personally as a company, is to be very crisp and clear on the vision and the mission of the organisation. Whether that's the company overall, or whether it's a division, or whether it's just your little group. But what exactly is it that you are trying to achieve? We actually use a model inside Cisco called VSE. Vision, strategy, execution. Vision, this is what we will look like in 5 years' time, this is what we will achieve. Strategy, here's the 3 steps we will take over the next 3 years to get there. And execution, here's the 10 steps we're going to take this year to achieve on those strategic steps. Very simple, but actually very profound, to sit down with the team and really understand what your vision, strategy and execution is paramount, because the elephant is far too big to try and eat all in one go. So you need to be very crisp and make sure everybody is aligned to that one vision and that strategy.
And Simon Accenture, you're in the business of advising on change. Are there any organisations that you advise who say, we're really happy the way we are, thanks, and we'd like to keep it that way?
I think there are always parts of organisations that say they're very happy as they are. That's the problem. I would completely concur.
Everybody else must change, but not me.
Correct. I would completely concur with what Rick says, the clarity of vision, strategy and execution, and then when you are actually getting on with doing it, get on with doing it. So I think the other thing I would say, it really depends. There's something about the scale of change as well, and I think what we find ourselves saying to a lot of private sector organisations is just keep it simple. So look very carefully at the amount of change an organisation can accommodate, and de-risk it, simplify it, remove the dependencies, keep it really, really simple, because it's really hard to do successfully. And as we all know, you can waste a lot of energy and create a lot of heat and light and move things organisationally and not achieve the end result you want. So I think you have to be very clear and very sparing and constantly understand why you're doing the things you're doing and be able to link it back to that vision and that strategy.